past year. I want to bring in Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, a Democrat from Ohio. She's the co-chair and co-founder of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. So we hear an additional $200 million. This is coming as we are also hearing from the Ukrainian foreign minister, who is grateful for the aid that is coming from the United States, but says more is needed. Do you think that this $200 million is just the start of another tranche?
Well, first of all, thank you for your phenomenal coverage. The American people and the world are really learning about the tyrannical rule in Russia for many of our young people for the first time. And I just congratulate you. I'm so proud of you as Free Press. In terms of the additional funding for defense, yes, the United States has been a consistent supplier of money for weapons for Ukraine. Recognize that the Russian military is so much larger than Ukraine's. In fact, Russia spends 10 times more every year than the Ukrainians do on defense, and their defense is much more, the Russians are much more sophisticated. They have 6 times as many airplanes and they're more lethal. You're talking about ground forces that 3 times that Ukraine even has available to it. It's really a David and Goliath fight, and the Ukrainians are distinguishing themselves on what is already sacred soil if you look back at the last century. So these dollars will help provide at least some additional weapons, and some of our allies in Europe are doing the same. But it's truly an unfair fight, and the Ukrainians are fighting heroically.
And on that note, some of the asks aren't necessarily financially related, right? And the delay from the United States, I'm specifically referencing the MiG-29s that the Ukrainians have been asking for, that Poland had been willing to deliver to the Americans to then deliver to Ukraine. The president and this administration has been adamant that that is just not tenable. Again, going back to the foreign minister's comments just a few moments ago, he said that Ukrainian civilian lives could have been saved if planes had been delivered to Ukraine. Do you think that that was a wrong move and decision on the president's part?
Only history will tell us that, but you might remember the Malaysian airliner that went down at the Ukraine-Russia border just a few years ago. Russia has very, very sophisticated weaponry to bring down planes, and they are using their arsenal against a population now less than 40 million people in Ukraine. They have over 130 million people in Russia, over 11 time zones. So it's simply not a fair fight. However, because they are a nuclear power and they have the ability to bring down craft, what has been happening to date with the Ukrainian Air Force, underpersoned, under-equipped, they have been extraordinary in their ability to shoot down Russian craft and to meet some of the oncoming missiles, but obviously they don't have the proper equipment. So I am someone who very much supports at some point here a ceasefire. Every place that Russia fights, she leaves completable. Look at Syria, a beautiful country that Russia just carpet bombed, right? We don't want that to happen in Ukraine. It's happening already in some of the eastern cities. We've seen that, and now the Russian forces are poised toward Kyiv. Really, it seems to me that there ought to be a diplomatic channel that is operating against this scorched earth policy so that we can actually, as adults in this world, resolve this conflict in a way that resolves Russia's worries, although most of them are false, and gives Ukraine a chance to access to Europe.
Yeah, and as we heard from President Zelensky today, he said some small towns and villages have just disappeared now due to Russia's indiscriminate bombing and attacks. You have a large constituency of Ukrainian immigrants in your district. I'm just curious, how are they responding to all of this? Because it has been interesting and inspiring, I would say, to see that Americans and those in Europe as well have really rallied in support of Ukraine and approved of more aid coming from their leadership.
Yes, and I would say the Ukrainian Americans have been magnificent. Any American, including myself, whose ancestors come from Europe, we understand the enemy. In fact, our dad war against the Bolsheviks in 1918, and now a century later, we're in the same territory, right? We're trying to fend off this state that should grow up and become part of the modern world and not have the free world have to have this standoff. Russia should be a great nation. She has such potential. I visited her so many times, and she ought to move to the negotiating table. But in terms of my own constituencies, they're collecting money, they're collecting objects, goods to eventually be shipped over. Global Cleveland has been magnificent. The Cleveland Foundation, the Great Lakes Consortium for International Training and Development, USAID, and I've got this today. Americans are saying what to do first. What to do first is to go to usaid.gov, and our State Department will tell you how to collect your money, where to place it, at least initially. Isn't that good?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, we can see it loud and clear, and I agree with you. It is inspiring to see how charitable so many in this country are to helping those in Ukraine who are in desperate need of aid. Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, thank you for your time.